Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, if you have hubcaps, go ahead and remove those. Next, we're going to remove all 4 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we have a nice clear view of our axle nut right here. There's a cotter pin that locks it in, so let's go ahead and remove the cotter pin and then the nut. Now we'll use a 32mm socket to remove the axle nut. Now grab a hammer and a punch. We're going to come right in the center here and break the axle free from the wheel bearing. Now let's move along to this area right here where the ball joint goes into the knuckle. I'm going to remove the nut that's on the rearward side by holding the bolt that's on the other side at the same time. Now once you have the nut off of there, go ahead and remove the bolt. It's very common for it to be frozen in here. You can try to turn it from the other side back and forth with some penetrant, and of course try using a punch with a hammer. Now I'm just going to use a hammer, and you can use a chisel or a pry bar, whatever you have. We're just going to try to get in between the 2 ears on the knuckle here that hold the ball joint, and we're going to try to spread those ears a tiny bit. Once they're spread, hit them with some penetrant so it can soak. Now let's grab a pickle fork and a hammer and start separating the ball joint from the knuckle. Now let's come up here to the area on the strut where our sway bar link connects. We want to just go ahead and remove that. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on to the back side here with my wrench. I'll remove the nut. Now we can remove this. Now that we've done that, go over on the other side of the vehicle, remove the wheel, and remove the upper sway bar link as well. Once you have the other side off, you can go ahead and grab onto this. We'll lift it up, and that gives us access to our mounting bolts down along this area. Let's get our 21mm socket on there. Now we can move along to this back area here on the control arm. You're going to find a nut right up on top. Go ahead and hold that with your wrench. We'll come underneath with a socket and remove the bolt from underneath. Now that we have all our mounting hardware out of here, we're going to continue on by trying to pull the control arm away from the subframe. Once we have it away, we'll bring it on down, and then we can start removing the ball joint from the knuckle. While we're pulling this, you want to be paying attention up here at the axle where it goes into the bearing. You definitely don't want to put a tug on the axle, so while you're pulling, make sure that you push that axle in at the same time. There it is, friends. Let's go ahead and clean up the area. All right, now it's time to install our brand new lower control arm. Let's go ahead and bring this up. We're going to start the rear end into the subframe there. We just want to get that bolt hole so it's lined up. Now we can take our bolt with some red thread locker. We'll start it right on in here. Grab our nut. Let's start the nut on there. Leave it just like this, and we'll continue on. Let's swing the control arm into position here. We can start in both of these mounting bolts as well, with some red thread locker, of course. Let's leave those loose. We'll go ahead and take this axle. We're going to slide it into the wheel bearing here. Okay. Press down on that control arm. We'll get the ball joint lined up with the knuckle. There we are. Now let's just go ahead and jack up underneath the control arm, being very careful not to damage the ball joint while we do this. Once you're sure that the ball joint's pressed all the way up into the knuckle as far as it has to be, we'll continue on by putting in our pinch bolt. Let's get our nut on there. Hold the bolt, snug the nut. Let's torque this to 41 foot-pounds. Remove your jack. Now we can start snugging our forward mounting bolts. Now let's torque these to 169 foot-pounds. Now let's make our way back here, snug this one up. And now we can torque this to 140 foot-pounds. Now let's get our sway bar link on here. We'll snug this up, torque it to 58 foot-pounds. Now, of course, you're going to want to make sure that you do the same on the other side. Now we can get our axle nut on here. Go ahead and bottom this out by hand, never with an impact gun. Now at this point, we're going to continue on to torquing this in a minute, but I'm just going to go ahead and put the wheel up on here. We'll snug it up, get it back on the ground so this can't spin, and then we can torque this and the wheel. Now with the wheel back on the ground, we can continue torquing. Let's go ahead and torque this axle nut to 92 foot-pounds. Now let's make sure we lock this in. Come on. Put that cotter pin in. Make sure that you peen it over so it doesn't actually loosen up on you. And now we're going to torque the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. If you have a hubcap, go ahead and put that on now. You want to make sure that you have your valve stem hole lined up with the valve stem on the wheel. Line it up. Give it a couple loving bonks. Make sure it's secure so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. After you're done all that, go ahead and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks.